Today on Dylan Talks Tone, we're going to talk about guitar cables. My name is Dylan, this is Dylan Talks Tone. You know, on this channel we have all kinds of stuff about guitar tone. Hit the little subscribe button and the little bell next to it. That way you know the next time we do a cool new video just like this one. Today we're going to talk about guitar cables. We know that this is a really important factor to our guitar tone because this is how the signal gets from the guitar to the amp, right? It's got to go through there. It's really important. Does the quality of the cable matter? And does the length of the cable matter? That is a very interesting question. Typically, people use a cable like this, like a 15-foot cable. This is, we'll put one of these gray things up here. You can click on it and you can buy these cables at DylanTalksTone.com. They're really good. But let's talk about why a cable is good. And then the other thing is, we're gonna have a fun experiment today, and we're gonna talk about how much length can have a factor in your guitar tone, and we're gonna exaggerate it completely, because here's what I'm gonna do. Check this out. Since we make guitar cables here at Dylan Talks Tone, I order it in 500-foot spools. And I noticed yesterday that there's a little nub sticking out on this end, and then we've got this end, obviously the end of the cable. So what we're gonna do, just for fun, is we're gonna make a 500-foot long guitar cable, and we're gonna plug it in, and we're gonna try to capture the difference between a quality 15-foot cable and the tone of a 500-foot guitar cable. This is going to, well, let's just see what happens. Come on. Okay. Dang, that thing weighs a lot. Alright, so you're probably thinking to yourself, this is kind of a dumb test. What's the relevance of making a 500-foot cable, and what does it even matter? You know on this channel that I can't stand A/B tests. And the reason I can't stand A/B tests is because when you're A/Bing something, a lot of times the results are so close together that it is very subjective. So what we hope to do is take the subjectivity out of it, and so with a really exaggerated extreme, show you what guitar cables, when they're long or when they are high capacitance, what they can do to your signal. If you are not familiar with what a guitar cable can do to your signal, let's talk about that as we make this cable. Every object, whether it is conductive to electricity or not, can pass electricity. In fact, that's what a capacitor does. A capacitor is a piece of plastic, polyurethane, other materials, whatever they're made of, with two plates of metal, a distance apart, and the size of those plates of metal, as well as the distance between those pieces of metal, that determines what a capacitor value is. Simple as that. But the bottom line is, electricity, especially when there's a ground on one side and not on the other, will pass through things that don't necessarily conduct electricity. That's the simplest way to say it. There's definitely more complicated ways to explain that, but the bottom line is, when you have a guitar cable, such as this one, and we have the ground on the outside and the center conductor in the middle, believe it or not, the signal coming through the center conductor can leak out and be lost out to the ground on the outside of the cable. Every guitar cable does this to some extent. Now, really good guitar cables, like this stuff, don't do it nearly as bad as some of the other brands that you find hanging on the wall on the shelf at your various guitar stores. This stuff is actually far superior to that. But in order to show that, this whole effect is exaggerated by how long the cable is. So if you have a very short cable, like a 6-inch patch cable, you may not hear it. If you have a 15 or 20-foot cable, a poor quality cable versus a very high quality cable, you can kind of hear that, and depending on the pickups and that sort of stuff, you can hear it more or less some days than others, depending on the rest of your guitar setup. So in order to show you what length has to do with your quality of your tone, and how important it is to have a good guitar cable, we're going to exaggerate all the factors that are normally used in a test like this. We have a single 500-foot guitar cable. All right, so here we go. I basically just put patch cable ends on the end of it. After this, we're going to talk about what length of your guitar cable actually means to your guitar tone, because there's something in here that you probably haven't thought of yet. All right, so let's go through how we've got this set up. Our Creation Music Company pedal board over here with all the Keeley effects is all out of the loop today. Of course, the Kemper controller is still on because that's what controls my amp. So we've got a really clean profile on the amp today. And we just have the 500-foot cable going through the tuner. And the only reason it's going through the tuner is because all I had was this little stubby of cable there. And then going to a cable to go out to the amp. Let's hear what this thing sounds like. All right, here we go. Bridge position. This is a Dylan Pickups flat 6 telly pickup. So I figured the most clarity, the most twang possible, right? So let's hear what this thing sounds like with a 500-foot cable. So, what you're thinking is, it sounds like the tone knob is rolled all the way off. But actually the tone knob is all the way up. In fact, I have a tone bypass on this guitar, so there's no tone knob in the circuit whatsoever. The tone loss, or the tone change as I more accurately like to call it, is because the cable has become a capacitor, okay? So, over the length of a cable, we lose those highs because of capacitance. What we ended up with is a huge capacitor between here and the tuner. What's really crazy about it is I measured the capacitance of 500 feet of cable, and it was about 0.01 microfarads, which is, it's not quite the tone cap in a telly with the knob all the way down, but very, very close. So you can see the huge difference. Now, let's watch this. So we'll do it back to back. Watch this. Let's go ahead and switch over to a 10-foot Dylan cable. Huge difference. Crazy, huh? All right, so let's get down on the floor with the pedal board, and I'm going to show you where the length of cable matters and where it doesn't matter as much, and why it's important to spend money and have a good guitar cable on the one that goes from the guitar to the pedal board. Now we've got everything kind of back how it normally is on my pedal board. We've got our Creation Music Company pedal board down here. Here's some interesting things about cable length. If you have a bunch of true bypass pedals, okay, so true bypass, true bypass, true bypass, true bypass, and then the cable that goes to the amp, then that means that you have one length of cable coming from your guitar through your pedal board, through your pedals, and then to your amp, because it's acting as one cable. If you have a buffer, so let's put this compressor here, then that means that effectively your cable length ends right here. Because then after that, this is amplifying, because there's an amp in here. Once you have a pedal that's on, then the signal after that is affected by everything that's going on here. It is not passively losing signal anymore to capacitance of the cable. If you have an always on pedal, or if you have a buffered tuner that lives here, then everything after it, it's not as key. It does make a difference, but it's not as key as the one that comes from the guitar to the pedal board. And there's an interesting thing and phenomena that happens here. Okay, remember at the beginning of the video when I told you to stick around to this part so you might pick up on something that you might not realize. In a passive guitar, the cable up to this point where it comes to its first buffered input, whether that be a tuner or your amp if you have no pedals in between, or a boost or whatever. The end of from the guitar to where the cable enters its first buffered input is part of this guitar signal. Now we saw that in very exaggerated form with a 500-foot cable. It was like we added a tone pot to the guitar and turned it all the way down. So that means that this cable from the guitar to the pedal board, essentially, to the pedal board to the first buffered input, is part of the guitar signal in a passive guitar. Now actives it's different, but in a passive guitar, this is part of the guitar signal here. It's part of the guitar circuit here. We proved that by showing you that we can add capacitance to this guitar and completely change the tone without even messing with any of the knobs. And in fact, it has so much of an effect, or can have so much of an effect, that it will actually change the frequency response of your pickups. It will make your guitar act completely differently because of essentially the capacitor that you're adding by putting a cable between here and the pedal board. Now, some people like that. People use coily chords with Jazz Masters, for instance, to take some of the highs off. And you might say, well, I might not be able to hear it actually in my normal setup. But I know for a fact that even with a 15-foot cable, going from a really high quality cable to a lower quality cable, you can tell the difference. And not only is it the cable itself, like I said, but it interacts with the guitar and it changes the guitar. That depends on your pots, it depends on your caps, it depends on how good your pickups are and how dynamic everything is. Not every guitar is as dynamic as the next, so you might not be able to with a 10 or 15-foot cable with your guitar hear it, but many people can, depending on their setup. I'm not blaming this on your ears, I'm not blaming it on your experience. It's a lot to do with the actual setup in the instrument itself. But I would recommend trying to have as high quality cable as possible with the lowest amount of capacitance possible between the guitar and the pedal board. Because once you take that away, remember with the 500-foot cable, I couldn't put it back in. There was no way for me to put that tone back in. I could go over here and fiddle with pedals, but there's no way for me to get that back. Now that's an extreme example, but with the normal guitar and a 20-foot cable, there's still some stuff there that I lose if I have a low quality cable that I cannot get back. And people will say, well, I don't want it that crisp. Well, that's okay. You can use your tone circuit and you can use your amp and your various pedals and stuff to dial that back a little bit. But once it's gone because of the cable, you can never get it back. And so that's why I recommend having as high a quality cable as possible. Go to the description below. You can see where to get this stuff. We actually also have do-it-yourself kits for these cables, so you can build them yourself and have the same quality for a lesser price and all sorts of stuff. This is really interesting. This was fun. I'm glad we were able to do this. If you have any questions or wonder about cables or about buffers or about patch cables or about any of that kind of stuff to do with guitar tone, do me a favor, put it in the comments below and we'll make a video just for you. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell because we're trying to do more like fun stuff like this, more cool videos like this one that kind of mess with and demonstrate various myths and things that go along with guitar tone. So I hope you really enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the like button and share it. That would be amazing. Oh, and did you notice below there is merch now? You can buy Dylan's shirts and hoodies and coffee cups down there below in the comments. So cool, man. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.